Good evening and welcome to India Prime on WION. I'm Aisha Sindhu. On tonight's discussion, can Hindus in India be considered minorities? If yes, what implications will this have on the country's polity and society? The Union Minister Jitendra Singh has sparked a debate over Hindu minorities in Jammu and Kashmir and other northeastern states, calling their status an anomaly or aberration in the constitution. Before we dive into the debate, here's exactly what the minister had to say.
If you go by the constitutional position, a Muslim is a minority member, regardless of whether he is living in a state where he is in majority, like Jammu. Similarly, Christian is a member of a minority community, even if he is living in Meghalaya, which is a Christian majority state. A Sikh is a member of a minority community, even if he is living in Punjab, which is Sikh dominated. So there is certainly an aberration which nobody can deny, and that is exactly what has seized the attention of the Supreme Court.
My colleague and WION's correspondent Raghvendra Rao filed a report on the issue. Listen in.
In areas where they are less in numbers, Hindus could soon be declared a minority community if plans being worked out by the Narendra Modi government are carried through. Though this issue has no simplistic answers, what is clear is that this is a constitutional issue which requires a constitutional discussion as well as a constitutional remedy. In New Delhi, with video journalist Neeraj Patel, Raghvendra Rao, WION.
We've also heard reactions from Sushil Pandit, who is a Kashmiri activist, and as well as Sanjay Ganju, the president of the Jammu and Kashmir Vichar Manch. Here's what the both of them had to say.
In the name of healing touch, a situation is being aggravated day in and day out. Hatred against India, Hindu India, is being sowed. And the idea that a Muslim majority province cannot live in a Hindu majority India is being propagated.
Hindus constitute around 3% of the population. Though we were, thrown out of Kashmir Valley in 1990, and we are, scattered all over. So we have a separate ethnic identity. So as per UN Charter also we qualify for minority status. And even if you look at the Hindu population in J&K, which is around 28% and is a minority in that state as compared to Muslims, which is 68%.
Now, as per 2011 census data, Muslims are in majority in the state of Jammu and Kashmir and in Lakshadweep. Meanwhile, Christians are in a majority in the states of Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland in the northeast of the country. Meanwhile, Sikhs form a majority in the state of Punjab. All right, so obviously this is a situation that's been brought up by the statement that's been made by the Union Minister Jitendra Singh in an exclusive interview with WION earlier this week. He says that Hindus deserve to have minority rights in states where they are in minority. We're joined in the studio by Kamal Haq, the spokesperson for Panun Kashmir. Sir, thanks for being here with us in the studio. Appreciate you giving us your time. When we look at the statement made by Mr. Singh recently, when it comes to minority status for Hindus in Jammu and Kashmir, what exactly do you think this will signify for you?
I think if this thing comes through, this will be the delivering justice to a microscopic minority in Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir is essentially a Muslim-dominated area who constitute around 69% of the population. And 28% are the Hindus, rest Buddhists and Sikhs constitute the rest. But if you see within that 28% minority, that's the Hindu population, as of 1990, Kashmiri Pandit constituted just less than 3%. Now, in a state like Jammu and Kashmir, there is a lot of, I would say, dichotomy and willful neglect, or I would say the willful conspiracy.
All right.
To cheat not only the Indian governments, not only the Indian state, but also the genuine aspirations of the minorities in the valley. Whenever there's questions arises of minority welfare schemes of the central government, Jammu and Kashmir puts forth this argument of being the minority and distributes the largest in its own Muslim-dominated areas. But when it comes to the sharing of states' resources in terms of education, in terms of services, in terms of any other social welfare measures, in that in those schemes, they deny these rights to the minorities on the plea that since they are the majorities, minorities don't have that much of share in those things. So somewhere or the other, though the Muslims and the nationally, as per the constitution, do constitute majority, but I think in places where the minorities are really microscopic, it definitely needs a fresh look.
So do you feel that this should happen not just in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, that other states need to come under the purview as well?
Obviously, wherever there are minorities, which otherwise nationally are a majority, but are minorities in various places, like you said in Northeast, or for that matter in Jammu and Kashmir, I think there needs to be a constitutional provision to protect them, to protect their interests, and allow them an equal share and equal opportunities of growth, education, services, employment, and other things which otherwise they are deprived of.
Right.
So something I think Dr. Jitendra Singh, if he has said something, I think it deserves wider debate and a rethinking of the whole issue as of now.
Right. Do you feel the fact that Dr. Jitendra Singh being from the BJP might narrow the focus of this conversation?
Unfortunately, it can happen, but I think we need to visit above. We need to rise above the narrow political schisms and view it as more as an humanitarian problem. Now, if you see what's happening in Kashmir, Kashmir there is predominantly now a Muslim majority area, where the Kashmiri Hindus, Kashmiri Pandits now constitute even less than 0.1%. I think there are hardly 6,000 to 7,000 people, even less than that, who now live in Kashmir. And they live in such a miserable conditions. No benefits, no state-sponsored schemes are available to them. Nothing comes to them. Whatever comes in the name of development, whatever comes in the name of minority commission, whatever comes into name in name of welfare for the minorities are being cornered by the 99.99% of the majority in the value. So you don't look at this problem purely from the political point of view. It needs to be addressed from the social and from the humanitarian point of view. And to that extent, I think if this government is able to do something for such minorities, it will be a great step forward.
Do you think that the fact that there's an alignment between center and state as far as politics go at this point in time, that might provide an extra fillip to this being pushed through?
I don't know, because it seems that though there is an alliance in the state, but most of the times they seem to be principally at loggerheads as far as their principles go. But I think they might be able to converge on certain things. This could become a very sensitive issue in the valley, because then it might be seen as another attempt to change the status of whatever is there in the valley. But then the government must find out a way. They must consult with their partner in J&K and work out a solution, which is quite necessary if you want to save the future of these really small minorities in the valley.
All right. So stay with us, Mr. Haq. I will come back to you very shortly, especially on terms of the development agenda of the BJP. But let's also go across to Aishwarya Bhati. She is a Supreme Court lawyer. She's joining us on the program right now. Aishwarya, thanks so much for speaking with us here at WION. Looking at Dr. Jitendra Singh's statement from a constitutional and legal point of view, does the NDA government have meat in this argument?
See, you will have to understand this from the perspective that the Constitution really does not have a definition of minority. Now, minority rights are available under Article 29 and 30 of the Constitution of India. How the definition of minority has come in as to who minority will be, that is clear from judgments of the Supreme Court. Now, the most important judgment in this regard is the judgment of TMA Pai, which is a judgment of 2002 of Supreme Court. It is a constitution bench of 11 judges of the Supreme Court which had this issue before them, and they determined that, you know, it has to be with respect to a state that the minority has to be determined. This judgment was subsequently also affirmed by a 7-judge bench judgment in PA Inamdar in 2005. So, despite minority not being defined in the Constitution of India, it has been laid down so by the judgments of the Constitution bench of Supreme Court. Now, of course, there is an anomaly because, you know, there are states, Punjab, J&K, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Manipur. These are states where the community which is other, and, you know, let's also bear in mind that there are two kinds of minorities that are protected by the Constitution. There is linguistic and religious. So both of these and their culture you know, language, so that has to be protected. Now, when you look at it from a state's perspective, there are all these states that I mentioned and a couple of more where the community which is otherwise minority in the rest of the country is the majority in that particular state.
Right.
However, you have to also bear in mind that there is a peculiar situation where in those states, the minority may be the majority, but the majority communities and some other communities are minuscule minorities in those states. So you can't deny them the benefit which is enshrined in the Constitution, the benefit which flows from policies of you know, the government of India, central government, with respect to minorities in those states. I think a via media will have to be found where on the national level minorities are identified. At the same time, it should not happen that at the state level minorities are not identified at all.
Right.
And they are obviously, because of non-identification, they are denied of their precious fundamental rights which are enshrined to them. And you know why these rights are there. We also have to understand that to protect their identity as a cultural, linguistic minority, it is important that they be given these protections and freedoms.
Fair enough, Aishwarya. Thanks for detailing all of that for us. I've got my colleague Raghavendra Rao also joining us. But before we go to him, just to remind our viewers exactly what the situation looks like, we'll just take a look at this map of India. Now, as per the 2011 census data, Muslims form majority in the state of Jammu and Kashmir and in Lakshadweep. Meanwhile, Christians are in majority in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland, all in the northeast of India, whereas Sikhs are the majority religious denomination in the state of Punjab. All right, let's go across to Raghavendra Rao. He filed a report for us on the minister's statement a short while before. We showed that to you. Raghavendra, when we look at the larger implications of Dr. Jitendra Singh's statement, what do you think those are going to be?
Well, Aisha, it's a very significant statement which has come from the government side with Mr. Jitendra Singh talking about Hindus, you know, the possibility of Hindus being accorded a minority status in states like J&K and several northeastern states. This has the potential to open a Pandora's box of sorts. We must also keep in mind that even the Supreme Court, the country's apex court, is treading very, very carefully as far as this sensitive issue is concerned. In a recent hearing, the Supreme Court asked the centre and the state government of Jammu and Kashmir to sit down and discuss it amongst themselves and chalk out a strategy, if at all, to figure out whether Hindus and several other communities and religion in Jammu and Kashmir need to be declared as minorities. Now, the government's reasoning could be that, you know, Hindus are lesser in number, particularly in the Kashmir area of J&K, particularly in the valley, and being in a minority, it denies them, you know, certain facilities, certain, you know, things which normally are considered as a given to minorities in the rest of the country.
Right.
The BJP, you know, the very fact that it is in government in J&K, it is in an alliance with the PDP there, we cannot and we must not rule out the politics which must be happening behind the scenes, you know, in the mooting of such a proposal. But yes, the last on this matter is still to be heard.
Absolutely, Raghvendra. Obviously, like you're pointing out, politics cannot be divorced from this conversation at any point in time. Mr. Haq, what would you say to people who will obviously come in and criticize this statement by Dr. Jitendra Singh, saying that if the constitution guarantees Muslims minority status in the whole country, taking that away from them, is that something that you think is going to happen, or do you feel that both can exist in tandem, that a national consensus and a statewide consensus can be formed?
I don't think Dr. Jitendra Singh in the wildest of imaginations would have thought of depriving the Muslim majority of Jammu and Kashmir of their minority benefits. I don't think it would have been on his mind. But I definitely think that the Muslim majority of Jammu and Kashmir must understand and must appreciate the concerns of the minuscule minorities in the Jammu and Kashmir. And there can be an agreement which can run in tandem, most probably, and it should happen that way also, that you protect the interests of the majority, all the facilities, the benefits that they have been getting till now, but also work out an arrangement by which you are not depriving the minorities of their share.
Okay.
So that is something which can be worked on, and there should be no problem or no objection to anybody on this, on that aspect. It should be welcomed by all of them. As it is also, if you see in Jammu and Kashmir, there are minorities, not only the Muslims as per the constitution, there are Sikhs as well as Buddhists also, which also constitute a minority. But if you see their share of benefits, I think till now, if my information is correct, the majority Muslim, 68% Muslim majority of the Jammu and Kashmir till now has been garnering more than 99.5% of the benefits that have accrued to the different people on account of various schemes of Government of India. I think even it's an injustice not only to the Hindus of Jammu and Kashmir, but I think the Ladakhis, the Bodhs of Ladakh and the Sikhs of Jammu and Kashmir are also being deprived of their fair share of the government's schemes. So it becomes imperative upon all the people, both at the political level, at the social level, at the economical level, to understand and appreciate that the upliftment of real minorities who are living in miseries should be above any political consideration, and everything can coexist peacefully within each other.
All right. So obviously, and India isn't, of course, alone in South Asia when it comes to talking about minority rights. And the country that comes to mind, of course, is Bangladesh and Pakistan. In fact, WION's Bangladesh Bureau Chief Saad Hamadi joins us on the program right now. Saad, obviously this conversation has heated up in India over the past couple of days, but when it comes to the debate over minority rights in your country, is that something that is, that pops up every now and then, or is it a raging point of conversation in the day-to-day?
Aisha, the persecution and discrimination for the minorities have been consistent since almost 1947, when Bangladesh was then East Pakistan. And even after the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, this has consistently followed. And that is what my discussion with the Hindu Buddhist Christian Minority Council shows. They've said that, well, the population of the minorities, particularly the Hindu, Christians and Buddhists, were about 29.7% in 1947, and since then it declined to 20% in 1970, and today it remains around 9.7% of the entire population, and that is just the number of people, so to speak. In terms of jobs, in terms of the qualitative lifestyle, none of them have actually improved, so to speak. I've spoken to these minority leaders and tried to understand their sense of how the situation is in the country and whether they face any kind of discrimination beyond the kind of persecution we have seen repeatedly almost over the last few years, where the minority groups have been attacked by vested quarters. Now, even in the areas of job and employment, we've seen some qualitative changes since 2008. The current Chief Justice of Bangladesh, Justice Surendra Kumar, is from the Hindu community.
Right.
And there have been some ranking positions for Hindu communities awarded since 2008. But other than that, there has not been essentially any special benefits given or any kind of special privilege or any kind of level that is assured to the minority community provided by the government or the state level.
Fair enough. Thanks for those details, Saad. Stay with us. Let's go back to Aishwarya. She's joining us on the program as well. Aishwarya, when it comes to India and the sort of multiplicity of Indian society and culture, do you feel that any conversation when it comes to minorities and majorities, those tag words as so to speak, it's going to face a big, long legal battle for any sort of dispensation if they're going to try and push forward what Dr. Jitendra Singh has spoken about?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We are a very unique country in that sense, and you know, our biggest strength is our diversity. So that needs to be protected, and that is the motive with which Article 29 and 30 were included in the Constitution of India, and not just included in Constitution anywhere. They are put in a very central place, which is Part 3 of the Constitution, which is fundamental rights of the Constitution. And it is very important that, you know, while we talk about communities which are minority communities in a nation, it is very important to understand that minority communities in the states also need to be protected. So I understand, I mean, we welcome the statement that Mr. Jitendra Singh has given, and I mean, we can't really take away the fact that Muslims are minority, though they may be majority in J&K, they're minority everywhere else. So some part of the benefit has, maybe a major part of the benefit has to go to them. But Mr. Haq very clearly spoke about the other minorities which are there. He talked about the Buddhists, you know, in the Leh region, in the Ladakh region, in the Jammu region. There are minorities and they have been persecuted, and we have seen how they had to, I mean, so much of persecution, and almost like, you know, they faced that they had to run away or lose their lives.
Right.
So these are very sensitive topics. They have to be discussed. A consensus has to be made. And it is very, very imperative that India protects its diversity within the umbrella of the Constitution, because we can't be taking populist measures and populist stands on this, turning a blind eye to the constitutional mandate. One reason why we are faltering here is, you know, the National Minority Commission Act is not really applicable to J&K, right. J&K having a special position under Article 370 of the Constitution. But when the court put that suggestion to them, Mr. Gopal Subramaniam, who was appearing for the government of J&K, very clearly agreed and said that yes, the J&K must have this act, and the minorities must be identified because they need the protection of the laws there in J&K also.
Right. In fact, we've got Pakistan Bureau Chief, WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui joining us on the program as well. Taha, obviously this throws up a lot of complex and prickly issues when it comes to a secular democracy like India. But when it comes to Pakistan, is it an equally complex and complicated scenario when it comes to minority rights?
Well, the minority rights here are clearly defined in the sense that, for example, if you look at the way, I mean, and when we talk about minorities, there's also ethnic minorities which are discriminated towards, but because largely the discussion here is about religious minorities, so I'll focus on that. And in the religious minorities, for example, if you look at the way the Pakistani constitution is designed, the Pakistani constitution sort of discriminates against religious minorities in the sense that, for example, the head of the country cannot be a non-Muslim. There are different rules for some religious minorities. For example, the Ahmadi community is discriminated within the Pakistani constitution. Then when it comes to, for example, the way the parliament operates, the minorities enjoy sort of a quota system where they get some representation, but usually we do not see any direct elections or direct sort of representation of the minorities in the parliament. So given all of that, we see that the way the minorities are dealt with in Pakistan, and the state policies towards minorities already have sort of factored in this discrimination, and then that translates into social behaviors that we see in Pakistan, and the way we see how minorities are discriminated, and usually, I mean, Pakistan's track record with when it comes to minorities, when it comes to attacks against them, has been quite poor. So all of that adds up to the fact that there's discrimination from the state, and then that continues on and translates down to discrimination from the society at large.
Right. So obviously, each country has its own unique perspective when it comes to it, and unique situations that it has to face. In fact, even in India, Jammu and Kashmir can't be ignored. It has to be looked at from a unique lens. As Aishwarya was pointing out, the National Minorities Act does not extend to Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, Wajahat Habibullah, the former National Minority Commissioner, who in 2014 asked for the National Commission of Minorities Act to be extended to Jammu and Kashmir, spoke exclusively with WION. Let's now listen into that conversation.
Insofar as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, and that is the state to which, of course, Mr. Jitendra Singh belongs, there I had recommended setting up our Minorities Commission. Because the J&K state doesn't come under the Constitution of India, as you know, and therefore the National Commission of Minorities Act doesn't apply to J&K. I had said two things. One is the law concerning the National Commission of Minorities Act of 1992 be extended to J&K. One. Number two, the state have its own National Commission of Minorities, State Commission of Minorities Act. Other state governments do have their own acts. Because the National Commission of Minority Act applies to the whole of India, but it gives the jurisdiction of the entire country to the National Commission of Minorities here, which means that minorities, those that are considered minorities for the whole country as a whole, those would come under that law and get the benefit.
I would have loved to take final reactions from my guests, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But I am going to extend my thanks to each of you, Aishwarya Bhati, as well as Mr. Haq here in the studio, my colleagues Taha Siddiqui, Saad Hamadi and Raghvendra Rao. Thank you all for joining in and bringing your unique perspectives to this conversation. We're going to wrap up India Prime on that note. More news and updates follow on the other side. This is Aisha Sindhu signing off for now. Thanks for joining us.